All right, and welcome to the next episode of the Unbiased podcast. We are going to do a special episode today. We're going to try something a little bit different, and this one's going to be titled Because Real Estate. And what we want to, because I hate the word mastermind, I think it's overused. I think it serves its purpose, but try to think of something different. But the purpose of this one is to kind of do a roundtable minus one person who I think is flying to Arizona or whatnot, but just to kind of talk about singular topics, things that are facing the industry and whatnot, get everybody's opinions on that. And I'll let everybody here introduce themselves, and we'll start with Christy.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I am Christy Bacon with the Move Virginia team from Keller Williams in Richmond. And we have a small team, admin, and I have 2 agents who work out of Williamsburg as well. So we're in this area, have been with Keller Williams in real estate since 2006. So I'm really young, not really. So yeah, I've seen it all. I was here during the crash, and now here we are.
That's right.
And it's not a crash.
That's
it's
right.
Definitely not a crash. So that's a good thing.
That is good. Yeah, after that one, you're probably not too concerned about this one.
Yeah, it's different. Everything's just different.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Now we have Logan with us.
Yeah, Logan Melton with KBM Home Inspect. Been inspecting houses since 2015 and started my own business back in 2020 and been rocking and rolling ever since then. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me again. And I'm excited to get this on the road. So
awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So we're missing Austin Highfill, who is the supervising broker, managing broker.
It's associate broker.
Associate broker. I don't know. There's a lot of different broker titles that get floated around out there over at Keller Williams as well, and the team leader of Eden Properties. So the purpose of this is to try to keep us all together as we move forward to develop rapport and all that stuff and flow, which is why it's important to know that Austin will be part of this moving forward. But today we want to talk about repairs and negotiating repair addendums. And, a few months ago, that really wasn't a thing. I know I've spoken to agents who haven't, they're like, I've gone 3 years, 2 years, 2.5 years without negotiating repairs or even writing a repair addendum. Yeah. And here we are in a very different market where we've gone from waiving inspections to the most part, everybody gets an inspection, and we're seeing a lot of different reactions to that, not just from agents trying to remember how to do repair addendums,
right?
But also buyers' reactions and how they're approaching this, because they've gone from, and it's weird because it's not like it's the same people, right? I mean,
right.
It's not like this is like, oh well, I'm going to Chick-fil-A now and I'm getting mine, right? No, this is completely different sets of buyers, but they're acting like they were jaded during this process, like, well, this time around it's my time,
right?
But reality is this is still their first time around. They have to do with it, but they're still approaching like, well, I want everything, I want it all, fix it all, reduce the price, give me money, whatever it is. Right. So, so what's been your experience with that?
So you described the kind of buyer that is how their reaction is. And it's actually interesting. There's 2 types of reactions, because you have the buyers who have survived through the March craze and then are still in this because they didn't get anything. And they're like the relieved buyers, like, oh my goodness, wait, I'm not going to pay way over list price and I get a home inspection. Yeah, my rate's higher, but here we are.
Right.
And so they're grateful. But then you have the other ones who are like, I'm going to get mine.
Right.
So their reaction is, oh, everything. I want everything on the list, right? Put it all on there. Yeah. So that's the tricky part in navigating this time around.
Yeah. And from what I've seen and heard is that there's a lot of, not just, I guess here as well, but across the country, that there's a lot of buyers backing out too of contracts.
We have seen more homes go back on the market than we have in the past 6 months, for sure. I mean, that, and you'll see either due to no fault of the seller, or you'll ask the agent. You'll ask the agent, and the buyer's demands were just ridiculous. And so that's what they're saying, why they're going back on too.
Yeah. So how do you manage that?
It's really interesting. I think having the conversations during your buyer consultation is critical about what your expectations are and what their expectations should be. because the bottom line is we are still very much in a seller's market. We have less than 2 months of inventory. We were talking about less than a month. Now we're like at a month and a half of inventory, and a seller's market is anything less than 5 to 6 months in inventory. Right. So there are still very many opportunities to be in a multiple offer situation, and there's pockets that are absolutely in that, depending on the price range, depending on the location. So educating your buyer on where they're specifically looking, for one, is important, because then they know what the expectations may be. It still may be an multiple offer situation. Now, we had one this weekend where it was both of them were multiple offer situations, and both of them still got inspections. So that can happen as well.
Right.
So it's really just about educating them up front on what expectations should be.
Yeah, and I've noticed, I'm sure you've noticed too, that your phone probably rings a little bit more after post-inspection for the same client.
Way more.
Yeah, because before, it was, even people waiving inspections, the inspections that we were getting was for informational purposes only, as is. So there's really, it is what it is.
Right.
And now we're getting emails and phone call follow-ups from the same client, after a lot more inspections than I was. Right. Well, what about
I agree with that.
Who do you call for that? How much do you think that's going to be? What do you think we should do with that? And they're saying if they're not going to do this, this, and this, what should we do? And it's like, man, just call your agent.
Yeah, that is not my job.
I'm tired. Yeah.
And Christy's point about expectations is something I think you could take that into any real industry. If you're running your own business or running something that's small, and setting realistic expectations, for whoever your client may be, just so when you do get to that point, it's not, not tackling that now. We've had the expectations set the whole time, and I do that a lot with even the emails that get sent to my clients before the inspection happens. I encourage them to read, what a home inspection is. Ask them ask their agent. What does a home inspection entail if you've never gone through one before? So I do think that having everybody on the same page before you even get to work is more important than
absolutely
than a lot of other things. So
and I think that's one of the things that anytime we do a class, we always talk about just nobody knows what we do to begin with. Right. So I always encourage agents to make sure you set those expectations to clients so they have a better understanding of what we do. Mm-hmm. And whatnot, and what we're going to find, because you can, experienced agents can walk through a house and kind of like, this is going to be a lot.
Yep.
Right? Oh yeah, this is going to be a lot. So you just need to know that this is going to be a lot. So we'll take it, piece by piece and whatnot. But it's definitely a sense of. I mean, I've had a couple, like last week I had one, and they were going. The agent's like, hey, we may not need to do this. Like, I'll let you know. Like, they're talking about backing out. And it's because they overshot their budget, basically, right? And once they started actually looking at numbers, they started getting concerned. And this was the weird part. They called the agent, and she was like, hey, look, I'm just letting you know they want out. And this is why. It's purely financial. And $424,000 home. And they're like, I'll call you back. Agent calls it back, says, all right, $24,000 off.
Okay.
And I was like, how long was this house on the market? She says 3 days.
Wow.
And they were quick to negotiate that.
Wow.
And then the inspection didn't help much after that because there were some things, I mean, it was a beautiful house until you started looking at it. And it was still a beautiful house. It just had a couple of high cost, boiler wasn't working like at all. It made some funny sounds.
Oh yeah, they tend to do that.
yeah. And there was a steel beam crushing some brick.
Gotcha.
So everything else was your normal 60-year-old old house, but it beautiful house, but it has some high dollar issues. And we're like, what do you do with that? Because the seller just came off $24,000 without blinking.
Right.
Are they going to agree to $20,000 to $30,000 worth of repair requests? At that point.
And we actually we just talked about this in our team meeting about how this literally was our mastermind yesterday in our team meeting about repaired addendums, and setting an expectation when you do decide to go through with getting the inspection and you're at this house where it's older and there's things that are going to come up. When you go to make your offer, we really have to decide if we're going to really take them down on the price or know that some things are going to come up on the inspection and we're going to have to address it again, because you don't want to leave a bad taste in their mouth and we haven't even gotten to inspections yet.
Right.
So if you're trying to really make this a win-win for both parties, let's really give them a fair price. But at the same time, we know we're going to go into this inspection, and if we need to ask for items or a reduction or whatever, we're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, and because it's going back to expectations, because I've seen where, I did a Civil War era house, pre-Civil War era house in Petersburg, and it was mid-renovation. What was done was really nice. The husband and wife that bought it to renovate, their marriage didn't last the renovation. So that's why I was back on the market. And, you find things wrong with a 200-year-old home because it's a 200-year-old home.
Right.
And the clients were like, I don't know about this. So they backed out. And then the next one was a 200-year-old home. And it's like, do you really want an old home or do you want a new home? Because it sounds like you want a new home that looks old, and that's just not what you're getting here. Yep. So you fall into that same trap of expectations. Yep. What are we actually looking for? Because you're just throwing money and wasting everybody's time at this point that you can't get back. Yep. So yeah, it's been fun.
It's interesting. And then when they actually see the report and their eyes are like glazed over, like, oh my goodness. That's the other, you still have that expectations conversation. Then remember what defines a legitimate repair request. Yeah. And that's one conversation we always have to have. Just because it's old or an antiquated system doesn't mean we can ask them to replace it.
And that's a great point that you bring up, because we can talk about that for a moment, because there's always friction there, between what the home inspector is writing up and what's actually as a defect, right? Mm-hmm. Because you'll get those conversations, and I'll agree 100% that if we're talking about a real estate transaction, and that's what we're there for, then 90% of what we write up probably isn't considered a defect by what the contract states, right? Mm-hmm. But we're not governed by that.
Right.
We're governed by, am I going to get a phone call later? Am I going to get threatened with a lawsuit later? Am I going to get 300 phone calls later? Whatever the case may be. So we're there to not impact based off the contract. We're there based off what the client wants to know, right? And I think there's a lot of friction there sometimes because, and we try to, I'm sure you try to separate out, maintenance information.
That's what I was going to say.
Actual defects. And
that summary page is a critical piece.
Yeah,
of
and there's still some gray area there, because we could talk about GFCIs, sure. Some people writing them up, as maintenance things if it's of a certain age because it's not a requirement,
Right.
We put it as a defect, you say that term loosely because it's just a quick, easy, cheap upgrade, sure. But it's not required because it's grandfather. And then, and then some people write up as a flat out safety issue,
Right.
Right. Well, it's that you get to that point where it's like, could I argue this is a safety issue?
Argue up
absolutely.
Or down.
It's like, railing height in an old home, baluster spacing, stuff like that. Is it, I feel like, obviously we're not code guys, we're not code inspectors or anything, but I feel like most building code was established because one thing happened to one person, somebody got sued, like the handrails going back to the wall, on stairs. Somebody somewhere in an apartment building hooked their bag around a railing and fell down the stairs. Somebody got sued. And now it's a code. And being, again, the expectations, a lot of times in these older houses, I tell clients straight to their face, I'll say, look, there's a couple things in here that I have to report on that I really wish I didn't have to, no GFI in the kitchen. Like, of course, the house was built in the 50s. Like, it's not going to have it. Nothing's changed. The same couple's been here since 1951.
Right.
They didn't do anything. So, it's stuff like that, and that goes back to expectations and being able to set the tone specifically at the inspection from the driveway, to the end when you're going over everything. So
absolutely,
and some of that stuff, like I said, it's that fine line because you can argue up or down. Whichever way you want it to go. And the GFCI is a good one. Just because, again, you ask for it, a lot of times the response is, it's grandfather, like we're not going to do it.
Right.
So is it really a defect? By terms of real estate transactions, no, right? But, I don't want as an inspector, it's such a good safety feature to have. You don't want it to get buried by we don't have to worry about that. It's not really a thing and whatnot. So you still want them to be aware, like, hey, this is nice thing to have. You know,
Right.
it can save lives, just like smoke detectors, right? You know, I know a realtor I may or may not be married to, whose inspection came back on her listing where they wrote up smoke detectors as a safety issue and the lack thereof in an older 800 square foot condo, you know?
Yeah.
And I say, I mean, just depends on the inspector, you know? Mine's always just maintenance, because I feel like if it's a $20 thing that you can buy at Home Depot
Right.
and put some sticky tape on it and stick it on the wall, then, you know, you should have more smoke detectors, but there's plenty of inspectors.
If you don't need a specialist to come in and do something.
Right. And there's
Correct.
plenty of inspectors that they'll argue all day long it's a safety defect, you know? And, you know, I mean, and I tell people all the time, you know, realtors all the time, this, you know, outside your standards of practice, which is like the real minimum standards, it's the Wild West.
You're not joking.
Yeah. I mean, I told my wife, so I could write up the grass if it's not green enough. I really wanted to,
Right.
you know, not the right shade green.
Funny you say that. I was doing an inspection for a buddy of mine who owns a landscaping company, and he was doing a rent-to-own situation. And as a joke in his report, I put in that where he parks his truck and his trailer, there's no grass there, and that a qualified landscaper should have this repaired. And he texted me like right after I sent the report. He's like, "You got to take that stuff out, man. My landlord hadn't seen the yard yet." I was like, "Okay, I'll take that out." Sorry about that. I thought he'd think it was funny, but
Yeah.
and I think he did, but obviously he didn't want anybody to see
Right.
it. It's like, well,
Right. So when you're negotiating this stuff, and you talked about repairs, credits, or lowering the price, so how does that work? Because I know a lot of times I've been told like, hey, we can't ask for any more money. Like we've maxed out what we can get at closing, so we can't take any more credits.
Right.
You know, so you got to fix it. So how does all of that work for those you know, math magicians out there?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the way that the addendum's written is you can ask for items to be repaired or replaced, or money, or both. And so finding out from the lender, first of all, if we have reached that point, then your only other option obviously would be then to lower the price. So then you can just ask for a price reduction if you're going to ask for a credit. Now at that point, I always recommend to my first-time buyers, let's just get them to address these issues, because these are things that you don't need. You've just spent your savings to get into this house. Let's get them to address some of these other items. Now, I will say this. If it's a flip,
that could be a whole nother
specifically on the north side,
That's right.
I really am cautious about how we get them to do repairs,
Right.
because if we've already seen concerns in the work that was done, well, that's like the work that they actually did.
Yeah.
It wasn't somebody else.
And that's even going beyond the fact that they're going to argue, right? Because now
Right.
they're feeling like
It's an insult.
they're worried. Right.
It's a personal insult to them.
Yeah.
So that's the tricky part on those. And that's why in those situations, I would rather just get the credit.
Right.
And it obviously means more money-wise to get the credit than the price reduction. Because let's be honest, like a $5,000 difference on a loan
It's not
is nothing. It's peanuts when it comes to having to have that liquid cash.
Talking about 30 years over
Yep.
Right.
$5,000
Right.
over 30
Doesn't mean
years.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So-
$3.
Couple bucks. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, can't even go to Starbucks.
No.
Yeah.
Right. So you really have to look at the situation on who the seller is too, on how you're going to ask and what you're going to ask for when it comes
So
to
what
those things.
determines that you can't get any more money?
So when you've reached the maximum amount of the closing cost contribution, because they cannot give you money towards your down payment.
Gotcha.
So that closing cost contribution usually totals around 3%
Okay.
of the sale price. Well, actually the loan amount.
Okay.
So that's the maximum that a seller can contribute.
All right. That's why I stick to home
There's
inspections.
Yeah, exactly.
definitely ways to be creative. Like
Right.
they could buy the home warranty or 2 years of a home warranty. So
Okay.
there's definitely ways to kind of bring on some of that extra money.
Yeah.
But really, like I said, for first-time buyers especially, I say go for them to make the repairs.
And so from the repairs, a lot of times, which I'm mostly thankful for, and I'll preface by saying I'm always happy to do them, but for a lot of times they don't get re-inspections, right? And you know, we can make an argument on why you should always get re-inspections, you know, and I can always make a business argument as why I'm thankful that not everybody does, right?
Yeah.
because that's just a whole nother set of stressors, right? On top of, less money, times,
minute.
and things like that. And it's always last minute. Hey, we close tomorrow. Can you give re-inspection
At
day?
the last minute.
No.
And it's hard because a lot of times on the buyer situation, we haven't seen the repair receipts to know what's been done until the last minute.
Yeah.
So when we see them and know what needed to be done and they say, oh, we're done, it's usually the last minute. So we can't schedule that until the last minute, which is then everybody's already stressed about the just getting to the closing table. And here we're going to add a reinspect it.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a listing agent, you're like, unless you know your contractors well, you're like, oh God, here we go. Here we go.
Yeah. Because, you start off, especially as a new agent, you're like, oh, this will be fine. We close tomorrow. And then, once you've been experienced agent, you're like, yeah, we're not closing. Like, because it's just not.
There's ways to do that. Like we've had to leave money in escrow before, which title companies do not like to do.
Right.
So you'd rather just delay. Lenders do not like to do that because documents are dated. So they hate that idea also, especially if it wasn't lender required repairs. They're like, that's on y'all. And that's another thing that it's important to know. We'd never show our repair request addendums to lenders unless it has money on it. And if it does have money, we actually separate the two.
I did a 4-point inspection yesterday, and I'm sure you've heard of 4 points down in Florida, right? It's a Florida thing, and it's for an insurance company, and it's electrical, HVAC, roofing, and plumbing. That's all it is, because they want to know. Because like down in Florida, if you have a roof older than 10 years, you're not getting insurance. Aluminum wiring, polybutylene, knob and tube. Not getting insurance, like flat out. Like you either got to fix it or you're not getting insurance, and that's not shopping carriers. It's the rule.
Man, roofers are doing well down there,
right? So, of course the client called around and like no agent knew about. Like I don't know what you're talking about. So he called me. I'm like, I'm familiar with them. Like and I got a template and all that stuff. And did the best we could, to do it because we just don't do them around here. And the insurance company gave him the option, like, because they like apparently this isn't a thing in Virginia. So if you can't find anybody to do a 4-point, you'll have to get a full home inspection. And I said, you don't want your insurance company seeing a full home inspection. You don't want the lenders to see a full home inspection. And you don't want the insurance company to see a full home inspection because they don't understand what we do, and they're going to stroke out when they see a 50-page report.
Yes,
absolutely. There's 60 things wrong with the house.
Yeah.
So we'll figure this 4-point out for you.
Oh yeah.
Because we don't need to deal with that. Because I dealt with that last summer with a lender. Underwriter got a hold of the report, and it was like, and the appraiser called me. He's like, I don't know why, but he's really concerned about the lack of GFCIs in the kitchen. I'm like, well, the house was built in like the 80s. It's a fairly clean house, He says, they're concerned the house is going to burn down because there's no GFCIs. I'm like, no, it's fine.
Is this
fine.
the underwriter was worried?
Yeah,
of course.
it's fine.
All of a sudden they become home inspectors.
I figured it was fine, but I told him I'd call you just to be safe. I said, okay, yeah, the house it's fine. Move on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely don't want people seeing.
Right.
They
want to see receipts at that point. They want to know what was done. Like, it's just a mess to have another. It's like too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing.
Yeah. So from there, you get, like I said, not a lot of people get to re-inspections, but I always tell people, I've had maybe one
inspection,
maybe two, where it's 100% done.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty good.
And if you started with that, like upon, like in your script, because you have a really good like script at the beginning where you tell like this is what your expectation should be, and then tell them the statistic of how many are actually the repairs are completed. One thing we do always check is when we get the repair receipts to make sure that the contractor that they use is still licensed with DPOR. Like that's huge because if they aren't, and then something happens after closing, the home warranty company, if there's a home warranty on the property, won't cover anything.
Or if the contractor's company matches the type of work. For example, they replaced a roof, but the invoice came on Jerry's sheet metal shop. That may or may not have happened. Which explains some of the issues with the roof. This brand new roof that was put on. You missed some steps there. What's and the not just a home warranty, but there's also some things with just other warranties. So if you go out and get a brand new HVAC system because the HVAC didn't work and that was negotiated, and come to find out it wasn't a licensed person, HVAC companies it's right there in their manuals that it voids the warranty if it's not a licensed HVAC company installing it. And so 2 years in, you have an issue. 3 years in, you have an issue. You get all the paperwork together and find out they're not licensed. They may reject that.
The manufacturer warranty. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so it actually goes beyond, water heaters, because how many times do we see water heaters get put in by,
Dad.
I put my water heater
Right.
in my old house.
Exactly.
I'm not a licensed plumber.
Yeah. So
electrician.
Somehow through that pipeline, they find out it was done by an unlicensed person, and void the warranty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys see it on the front end and we get it on the back end, and then we have to loop you back in.
Yeah.
And then I'll always get questions. So how did it end up going at that one house? From you like, oh Lord, we're still dealing with this.
Yeah.
I like asking that question, and I also hate asking that question because there's definitely an answer I want to hear, and then there's one I definitely don't want to hear. And 50% of the time it's.
So the fun part in all this is when, like I said, you get renovations are a big one, but you also get the reinspection, and now and if you go on to these inspector groups, you'll see that inspectors like, we're not there to judge the work. We're just there to see if they did anything. Well, no, I don't think that's true. Because just because you slapped a piece of wood on a cracked joist doesn't mean it's right, you know? And I'm not there to say, yeah, they did something, if it's still wrong.
Right.
So then you go out there and they did something, none of it was okay. And then you go back to the seller and says, no, this is done right. And then now it's like, well, the contractor wants to talk to you, And
every time.
Or the contractor wants to meet you on site. They want to meet you on site. And, those are just fun conversations to have,
As far as, did they do something or did they do it right? I use a cliche I use a lot of cliches at work, but then the realtors get tired of hearing the same thing over and over again. But the clients like it. I tell them, if it would come up on the inspection, this is my first time here, if it would come up on the inspection, then it's going to be a flagged item in my reinspection because it's still not right. So your example of a scab joist would be, that's something I would take a picture of and put in the original report. So if it's not right, it's just not right. So gotta get it done.
Yeah, we did this one, and I put the pictures in one of my presentations, and it's because the seller was the contractor, was the agent.
Oh,
right?
Goodness.
And it was that same situation of well, we want a credit because we don't really trust your work to begin with, right? And that guy called the agent screaming, don't know where you found this inspector from. He doesn't know what he's doing. Blah, and I, couldn't even open up the kitchen drawer without it banging another drawer. The insulation was installed backwards.
But it looked pretty.
It looked pretty. Yeah.
The pictures looked great.
I said, all you got to do is ask him, prove to me where it's right. And that's what I tell everybody. Like, I've been wrong. It's okay to be wrong. I've been wrong. I've had bad days. I've looked at something and said, that doesn't look right. And come to find out, it was right, because I was looking at one thing, thinking about another, and whatnot. And I'd rather be wrong and
not catch something.
Right, exactly, and whatnot. But at the end of the day, just prove that's right, show that's right. Manufacturer, code, whatever. But if you come back and say that because I've had this happen too. Well, code says that's okay. And I've gone back to like a 1947 code book just to prove somebody wrong, right? Because I knew I was right, at that point. It's never been okay. No, not in this century it's been okay, or the last one.
Was that double lug neutral or something?
Exactly. That was the issue.
I'm sure it was. Right. That's why I said it's never been okay.
It's always the issue.
Never been okay. Separating the floating bus bar on a sub panel.
Right,
oh, that was okay. No, it wasn't okay when the house was built. And
here's why.
That's always been in a code book, always, so those are always fun dealing with those. They're going to meet you on site for the reinspection.
Of course they are.
Great. And and sometimes the contractor's super cool, and like I didn't know that, sometimes very defensive,
yes,
and fun.
Good way to put it. Fun.
Fun is right.
Which is why in the end, a credit is always worth it on those situations.
It is, and that's why sometimes I like, I'll follow. I'm like, so what happened? Like we walked away. It's like, thank goodness. I just do not want to deal with that anymore, But I think also one of the other issues is the 7 degrees of separation too, right? Because we do the inspection. It goes to you or the buyer and the buyer's agent, and then it goes to the seller and the seller's agent, and then it goes to the contractor, and the contractor's trying to figure out what the picture is while I was upside down in the crawl space, and I couldn't get a decent picture and whatnot. And then it's so there is some of that as well that's lost in translation.
I could see that.
And whatnot, because there's, nobody can talk to anybody, which I'm thankful for. I don't want to talk to him, but there is some of that as well. Just that lack of contact that makes it hard to figure stuff out sometimes. Yeah. So, which leads me to the best part is in this area, cost to cure estimates.
Why do you make us do that?
Okay, and in your defense, I always tell them, listen, this is like a nationwide thing. So this doesn't mean that a contractor here in Richmond, East Coast, whatever, it's the pricing that relates to that. Like, we need to go ahead and call the contractor ourselves and get them to give us the estimate.
Yeah. And that's why you probably don't get to do it as much as I do. But when I go to Williamsburg and Newport News and those places, and man, like, why are you so happy? Because I don't have to do cost estimates.
I did one in Fredericksburg
So it's just
last
a
week.
Richmond thing.
It's specific to Richmond. Yeah.
It's specific to Richmond.
Yeah. There's only a few markets that require it,
2 or 3,
or ask for it. And I think what happened was, because of the way the contracts are written here, is that because it's supposed to be like the buyer is supposed to provide cost secure estimates, and somewhere, someplace, some home inspector either volunteered to do it one time, and then that was it.
Maybe, yeah, it's very possible. But I will say that in this market, those were used a lot more because people were writing up, like, I'm guilty of it. We wrote up addendums where the seller would pay an average of whatever the repair costs were, and I had times where they literally totaled up everything and then took the middle number of everything, and that was what we figured out everything. And
I talked to
there was times where that we were saying, like, on our contracts, that we wouldn't make a request for anything over $1,000, or we would only request items for over $5,000 if it was a certain repair to win a contract. And so that's when those kind of came in to play.
Cindy did that. She was sitting at the table the other day because they waived 2,000 total, I think, whatever it was.
The first two.
The first two, right? And she's sitting there going back and forth with the agent, and because she's on the list side. So she's she's on the buy side for that one. And so she's totaling everything up. And I walk by, I just laugh. She's like, "What are you laughing?" Like, "There's just made up numbers. Like, I don't even know what you're doing." Like, "No, that's like accurate. Why are you even doing that? It's just made up numbers, right?"
It is true, though. It is so true.
Yeah.
You did use those.
If I have to pinpoint, like, our number one phone call for issues, it would be cost estimates are off.
I bet.
Especially now. Everything's
so expensive.
Now.
And it doesn't matter. Because, I mean, I just had this phone call, and not that we get a ton of phone calls, because we don't, or at least they don't make it to me anyways. You'd have to ask Courtney and Colin, how many phone calls we actually get.
Stop bragging.
Come on. But just a couple weeks ago, it was I got an email, and a very upset client because the cost estimates. And come to find out, that's what it was, right? And there was more wrong with the deck than what you guys said was the initial issue. And I said, well, and I pulled up the report and, read it, and in big red letters, full evaluation of the deck, because it had multiple issues to include but not limited to, and all this, so at some point we just get tired of writing stuff up, right? So just the whole thing's trash.
Right.
And somebody look at it and then figure out what needs to be done.
Replace it.
At what point do you stop itemizing? And,
right.
Right.
Just write it up as a
So they didn't. They closed, got a contractor, $8 to $12,000 to fix it,
Wow.
and that's what the response was. I sent the report. I said, this is the issue. It's in the report. We told you to get a full evaluation. You didn't. Well, the inspector said, I said, the inspector told you don't trust our cost estimates because Gordon, I know how Gordon does things,
right?
And I know he told you.
Absolutely.
And in the report, at the top of the report, it says, these are a courtesy. Don't trust them.
Yeah.
Get your own, and you chose not to. So that's it's a bane of my existence. I wish we get rid of those.
I'm sorry. I do refer to them, but mostly for the little things, because the big stuff we have to get.
Yeah, and that's
especially HVAC or roof.
And I was down Williamsburg a couple of days ago, and like the middle section of the main beam was cut out, and the client was like, well, how much is that going to cost? I'm like, I don't know. A lot.
I don't know.
And I know we do cost estimates all the time, but I didn't have to down there. And I was like, get your own estimate, because it's a pain to get into that crawl space. Plenty of stuff to move around, but it's a crawl space and a crawl space and a crawl space. There's pipes in the way, and you're talking about a whole main beam needs to be taken out and replaced. And get your own estimates. That's all I can tell you. It could be $10,000. It could be $25,000.
Right.
It just depends on what's going to have to be done, the scope of work, and how big the guy's doing it. Because
exactly,
he's going to charge you more. So get your own cost estimates at the end of the day. But
absolutely,
it just and we see this probably more with inexperienced agents.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah.
I mean, hopefully, as an agent, you have a certain number of contractors kind of on speed dial who either you can send the report. I do this a lot of times with the electrical work.
Yeah.
I can send it over to him and he can just kind of eyeball it and say, based on the photos and what's been written up, this is what needs to be done.
Right. Yeah, and there's a couple companies out there. You just send a report and they'll price out everything based off the report.
Right. And again, their disclaimer is this is without me looking at it, of course. So
yeah, which leads to can be another issue, because sometimes we don't document, and it makes me laugh when we get, those conversations of, well, this one picture wasn't in the report. Okay, well, we took 10 other pictures of termite damage. Okay? Right. We didn't take that one. Remember a time when we didn't put pictures in the report?
No, I don't actually.
Right? I've heard stories.
You've heard stories.
I think there's an inspector out there somewhere that still uses the press hard 3 copies.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
But yeah, so we'll get that, because again, a representative number, right, of the pictures. If I see, if I've already taken 5-6 pictures of this issue, like I'm done.
Right.
It's just everywhere.
I mean, I'll do that with something simple as, if I go in, like I did a flip the other day and they hadn't finished painting or they hadn't painted yet or hadn't put the cover plates back on. I'm like, well, I'm not going to go around and put all these cover plates that are right there back on. I'm going to take a picture of one or two and say these are representative photos, right?
Exactly.
This is what a missing cover plate looks like. Let's pop one on anywhere that's missing. So
yep.
Instead of taking the same picture over and over again.
And then the agent's like, how long is this going to take?
Exactly.
I know we scheduled this for 9. I got someplace. Can we be done by 10?
Oh gosh.
True story.
In my experience, we know the quicker inspector is not always the best inspector.
That's right. Gordon did one a couple months ago, and like as soon as he got started, like, hey, do you think we could be done by in an hour and a half? And Gordon said, sure can. Which part do you want me to not check? We want you to check it all. Well, it depends.
Well, then we're not going to be out here by 10.
Or am I going to do the full inspection?
Fair enough. So yeah, those are fun as well. To Dylan. It's the whole repair thing is interesting to me, and I think as we've continued this movement into a more normalized market, I think it's just going to be fun to see where it goes, and I say fun so I don't cry, right? Kind of fun, because I think there was a lot of challenges before, and I think on top of some of the attitude towards this, like we talked about in the beginning, with people walking away a lot quicker or asking for everything, as lines in the sand type stuff.
Yeah.
And then you factor in the fact that there's a lot of agents that was born without any of this,
right?
Because they were born in put it to sell and as is waived inspections and whatnot, and I've seen some agents or listened to some frustrations of already dealing with agents who think that they're seasoned, experienced agents because they made it through the COVID boom,
right?
And now there's a lot of room left to grow there, and there's a lot of frustration brewing because of that. Just not understanding negotiation processes, not understanding, and it's clearly, it's not your place on the buy side or on the sell side, whichever side, to represent that other agent's clients for them, but you can kind of sense that there's some, like, they're just,
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Yeah. You're not representing your clients very well right now.
Right.
And it's kind of frustrating.
That's exactly what you want to say.
But the problem is so much of this stuff is done, I don't want to say in the dark, but without the client present, so they just don't know. They don't know how they're being represented. Right. Because it's all done away from them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in the room, so, and that's why I used to get certain people that still, 5-star reviews, sunshine and rainbows, best ever. And it's like, and you see that, and you're like, no, I remember that one. No, that was not. That was not. That was pretty horrible. So I think the market is going to present those challenges, and I've seen a lot. Just like you said, you had that contract or the repair negotiation class yesterday. I've seen a lot of offices start doing that, and
we're really in a place where there's probably agents who are licensed that have never written up a repair addendum before.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions for you. Is it's been so long, and a lot of these folks have just started in real estate.
Right.
How does that translate to you being a seasoned agent or experienced? I'm sure it has to be massively frustrating.
It's interesting because we have said over and over through this that we're turning into a skills-based market. Right. Yeah. So either you know what you're doing or you're going to get left behind.
Yeah. I read an article the other day about getting through. It was an older Home Inspector magazine. I forget exactly what the publication is, but it was talking about how, if you're a newer business, which I was at that point, if you don't have at least 5 or 6, 7 high producing agents, you're probably going to starve a little bit during this time, because all the sellers that, there's no inventory are going to go with the more experienced agent, and they're calling somebody else, not you. So,
right.
It's kind of an interesting read to know that, you need at least, that many just to keep your head above water. And that's just if you're yourself with no office or truck or, anything like that. It's just me. So I thought that was an interesting read. And I also got into the real estate side about how a lot of these folks that did start, and they're going to start starving, they're going to go back to their day job, not sell real estate again.
Yeah. Always happens.
Yeah, I think, and some of this is going to be what we talk about in the next one, but I think there's definitely going to be a weeding out. There's definitely going to be people in the entire industry, not just agents, but inspectors, lenders,
yeah,
and whatnot, title, yeah. And I think what people are getting caught up in right now, and I see it at least once a week, if not twice a week, in the inspector groups, is who else is slow, and then so everybody's like, oh yeah, I've done 3 this month. It's been slow for 3 months. And the problem with that is one, real estate is hyper-local. So,
absolutely.
You shouldn't be asking somebody in Oregon, what's business like, because it's just apples and oranges.
Right.
And 2, you're you start pulling up these people's profiles and doing some, because I'm bored, what else is there to do, right? Besides going down rabbit holes, and you realize there's no internet presence, there's no marketing,
right?
Their social media is horrible, and it's like, well, that's again apples and oranges. So I can't compare myself to what other people are doing if they're not doing what I'm doing, right? So my go-to is typically, is there anybody else in your area that's busy? If they are, then what are they doing?
Right. That's great.
Now, if everybody's slow, and then, start filling out applications. Right? You may want to start considering that. But if there's other people getting work, it's not going to be the same volume as last year or the year before that, because that was just ridiculous.
Right.
So you have to understand that I'm down from last year. Yes, because last year was abnormal. Right? It's an exception to the rule. You have to base those numbers, if you can, to 2017, 18, 19, when it was normal. If you don't, then you just got to kind of figure out where other people are at. Well, if they're busy, I'm okay, right? There's business to be had. So I think a lot of that gets lost right now, because people are just comparing themselves to the wrong set of measurements, I guess.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but we'll talk about that stuff next time.
Awesome.
That'll be fun. We'll get Austin in here, get his insights on that as well. So any closing thoughts?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
We got it covered.
Yeah.
Get your home inspections.
Get your home inspections.
We're here now. We can do
That's
some
right.
home inspections.
That's right. Yeah. Not just for informational purposes
Right,
only.
exactly. That phrase is
you get to
going
ask
away.
people. I know.
These are actually
Just
worth
like
something
walkthroughs. Yeah. Very few walkthroughs too. So they're starting to go away as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
That's good. I'm
absolutely
sure.
thrilled about that.
Yeah.
Me too.
Again, like I was saying, though, like we had 2 go under contract over the weekend in Williamsburg, and both of them had multiple offers. Both of them have inspections in there. One is legit and one is for informational purposes only. So it really just depends on the
there's
area.
still definitely pockets. There's still definitely pockets of people waiving. Still definitely pockets of, but it's not widespread.
No.
You know, it's definitely, if you want to be in this exclusive neighborhood, this is what it is.
Right.
For now. You
For
know,
now.
and the further we get down this path and more inventory and stuff, even those will start to
Right.
settle
I mean,
down.
it's slowing down. The intensity is slowing down.
Correct.
The sales, obviously, we're seeing sales slow down too, but part of that is because the inventory is so low. So you're going to naturally see fewer sales when there's less inventory. So
Less inventory, and we're still in the beginning phases. Again, I mean, there's 7,000 realtors in Richmond, right?
right.
So as that attrition starts to happen, then there's got to go somewhere.
Right.
So so the ones that stay, you know,
Skills based.
That's right. That's right. So what about you?
I can't think of much to close with. I had a good time. It was fun listening to y'all talk. I'm kidding. No, I appreciate you having me on again. I'm looking forward to doing it again. It's been really fun. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, until next time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks again.